Welcome to Cinema on a Shelf, a podcast about movies and physical media. My name is Matt, and thank you for spending some time with me instead of watching a movie. I promise I will try to make it worth your time. And given the time of year that I'm recording this podcast on, you may have a bunch of new movies that you are wanting to watch anyways, because it is getting to be the very end of November in 2025, and it's right around the time when there's going to be a lot of sales going on, and that's what I wanted to do in this episode. So I'm somewhat cheekily titling this episode Sale Season, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love a Budget. Little nod to Dr. Strangelove there, one of my favorite movies of all time. Today, what I wanted to talk a little bit about is physical media movie sales. It is getting to be that time of year near the end of November where Black Friday is upon us. In fact, probably a number of you are maybe already indulging in Black Friday deals. It seems like Black Friday deals are now Black Friday week deals, or even longer potentially with some of these sales. So people may be already involved with looking into the deals on physical media movies, and wanted to take a little bit of a look at not just Black Friday sales, but sales in general, what this means for the physical media space, how often they're happening, and a little bit about thinking about doing some planning and even budgeting for sales and how we as collectors approach these sales. Now, I don't know exactly if the term sale season really is exactly the perfect term for what I want to talk about, especially when it comes to physical media, as we'll find out. But because this is the time of year when Black Friday sales are going to be happening a little later, obviously, in the year going into the holiday season, there's going to be some holiday deals, as well as at the end of the year between, Boxing Day, if you're in Canada like me, or in a few other places that do those sort of Boxing Day, Boxing Week sales post-Christmas, or even going into the new year. There always seems to be some places that have some sales or deals of some kind going on. So thought this was an opportune time to take a little bit of a look at the various types of sales that go on. I know physical media labels and even places that just sell physical media do often engage in sales around this point in time, so thought it would be interesting time to take a little bit of a look at this topic and talk a little bit about how we as physical media collectors, do our shopping at some of these sales, and some things to look out for, a few things to remember, and also diving into a little bit of the psychology of sales and maybe starting to think about why we act the way we do at sales, or why we treat sales the way we do. Hopefully not going to throw any shade at any collector psychology, but I do think it is something to consider and be conscious of as we go through this whole sale season idea. So with Black Friday happening right around now, or every year going forward, I guess around this time, there are a huge number of physical media labels and places like Amazon and Walmart that sell physical media that will be doing Black Friday sales. So I think that's a decent place to start looking at what the sales calendar for physical media kind of looks like. And there is a definite calendar and sort of a sequence and schedule for a lot of these types of sales. And I do have to give a shout out to Dakota from the ContraZoom podcast, something you may have listened to in the past. He has pointed me to a really nice Reddit page that actually has a really good summary of physical media and boutique Blu-ray label sales that go on throughout the year. I think maybe he's just trying to get me to spend more money than I already might potentially be at these sales, but it was a really valuable tool in doing a little bit of research for this episode. So thanks Dakota for pointing me in that direction when I had mentioned a little bit about it. And obviously, Black Friday is probably the one that we're seeing. If you're listening to this right around the time that it goes live, it's the one you're probably noticing the most, and the one that probably has the most notoriety of yearly sales. Certainly in the United States, Black Friday kind of started as a concept in the United States, basically being the quote unquote first shopping day of the holiday season, because it happens on the American Thanksgiving weekend. And Black Friday is just something that a lot of stores have kind of seemed to adopt, even bleeding into other countries around the world. So it is one that a good amount of physical media labels have going. No matter what label you're into or collecting, they're probably doing some kind of Black Friday sale on their websites, or even in person in your favorite local Blu-ray market or brick and mortar store. So it's very likely you're going to see a lot around Black Friday. It happens on a yearly basis. Around this time in the month of November is also one of the really, really famous sales in the physical media space, and that is the Criterion Collection 50% off at Barnes & Noble sale, which is a sale that takes place twice a year, every July and November. In fact, if you listen to my last podcast episode, which was my second version of the Criterion Hall of Fame, part of that was sort of scheduled to coincide with the beginning of the Criterion Barnes & Noble sale, with a couple of extra titles that maybe you might be interested in checking out. I thought I would contribute in that way to it. This is something that on the physical media calendar, if you go to a lot of movie social media pages or YouTube channels or Reddit threads, you'll see a lot of people doing Criterion Barnes & Noble hauls this month and in July. They also will show a lot of that off at the Criterion flash sales. There are a couple of flash sales a year on the Criterion Collection's website. I believe they typically go on one in March and one in October. The one in October just recently happened. I actually picked up a few titles myself on that flash sale. And they usually are kind of around the same, time in the month. Weekends, they usually are a sale that goes on for about 48 hours or over the course of a weekend. If you're a Criterion Channel member, you usually kind of get a bit of a heads up as to when they're going on, because they typically send you a little coupon code or discount code that is, they sort of say you can save it for a next flash sale, and usually that flash sale is going to happen in about a week's time. So Criterion does have a little bit of a schedule with some of their regular sales, and obviously a partner with Barnes & Noble in the brick and mortar and online space to do that. I have been to a Barnes & Noble, like a physical location, during one of the Criterion sale months. This is a number of years ago now. I happened to be on vacation in Las Vegas when one of the sales was going on. I believe it was in November, because I wasn't in Las Vegas in the height of the summer heat in July. So have ordered stuff online from it. I have also been brick and mortar stores with it. So it's kind of an event as far as the physical media sales go throughout the year. Criterion certainly isn't the only label that does regular sales. In fact, there's a huge number of them. And on that Reddit thread that Dakota sent my way, there's a real good rundown. In fact, I think I'll probably put that Reddit thread link in the description of this podcast and of the YouTube version as well, to check everything out. But to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the other boutique Blu-ray labels that do have fairly regular sales, Vinegar Syndrome is a label that I've recently discussed on a previous episode. They definitely do Black Friday sales, and they've been going on currently. They also have a halfway to Black Friday sale, which goes on in the opposite 6-month time. They always, again, do some really, really nice deals for sort of that time for a short period, I believe over the course of a week. When I did my Vinegar Syndrome label introduction episode a few ago, A number of those titles that I reviewed were ones that I picked up from their halfway to Black Friday sale, which was a nice little way to get to discover some of the titles that they had there. Vinegar Syndrome also has subscriber weeks throughout the year at different times, where if you are a Vinegar Syndrome subscriber, you can get access to some really nice deals during those subscriber weeks. They do also, I believe, offer up the ability to become a Vinegar Syndrome subscriber at a discount. So if you become a subscriber, it means that you are basically, pre-ordering all of the titles from Vinegar Syndrome for a certain period of time. I don't know if it's over a full year or you can do shorter versions of that. But they do have subscriber weeks that happen at regular times throughout the year as well. And they also do have Partner Label Month, which is actually coming up very soon, starting in December. And they run it directly after their Black Friday sale, where on the Vinegar Syndrome website, they actually pause all of the mainline Vinegar Syndrome titles and basically give their entire website online store space to their partner labels, which I think is a really nice kind of unique thing that Vinegar Syndrome can do, because they do have so many partner labels. They typically do have some nice sales, maybe some extra sort of specialty limited edition slipcovers or other things that they offer up during partner label. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do have there, because I'm a very big fan of a lot of Vinegar Syndrome's partner labels. Arrow Video is also a boutique Blu-ray label that does have some regular sales that they engage in. The two that they kind of operate around chiefly as far as seasonal ones are around Halloween and Easter. And they will typically have things on their own website on pretty good discount during both of those times. Some of them really, really deeply discounted, other ones more of sort of a standardized discount. They do also have things discounted on some limited editions that are available if they're still in print. And they also have started to do some regular Barnes & Noble sales in a similar vein to the Criterion Collection 50% off sales. They do some 50% off sales in the months of January and August. So offsetting a little bit of the times when Criterion does it, but again, taking advantage of Barnes & Noble's online and physical presence in stores across the U.S. So they run those similar sales in there, as well as a few others kind of peppered here and there throughout the calendar year. There is also Severin Films that does a mid-year sale in June on their website. I'm a little less familiar with Severin, but do know it's a label that a lot of people do enjoy checking out and seeing what sort of releases they come up with. And in this June sale, I would be interested, I guess, coming to next June to maybe discover a little bit more about Severin. Maybe that's an upcoming label discovery for myself. There are some physical media labels that do sales on a little bit more of a frequent basis than some other ones. There's quite a few of them that will do sales at different times. And again, the Reddit thread does a really good job of going through a lot of them. But there are two specifically that I know of that often will do pretty regular sales. That would be Kino Lorber and Shout Factory. Kino Lorber's one that I have ordered from a couple of their different sales that they do throughout the year. They typically will do, a series of smaller sales with some little themes to them. I know in November they're currently doing one for Noir-vember. So Kino has kind of a long list of film noir that they do, including, in fact, box sets of kind of lost film noir sets. They, so they'll put all of those up in November to be purchased at a discount. And frequently throughout the year, they also just have ones where you can get things at deeper discount or maybe themed sales. Or I know in this year they've taken to doing a little bit of like very small sort of curated sales along with an email you get that I get from them. I subscribe to their web newsletter, and they're calling them like treasure chest finds, I believe it is. And so they for over a weekend starting on a Friday, we'll have, maybe a collection of 12 or 15 releases that all go within a certain theme, whether it's TV shows or swashbuckling adventures or, female directors or detective stories. They've done quite a bit with that, and they do tend to have a few more regular sales on their website. Shout Factory is a label that also has done this in the past. I haven't actually ordered directly from Shout Factory. I know recently that Shout Factory's been going through a few changes. They are now transitioning their physical media sales from their own website to another company called Grove Entertainment. So I'm not exactly sure if that change is going to change their approach to things going on sale, if it's going to be, in that sort of regular sale like they used to do, whether it's going to be more regimented, whether they'll do anything at all, I'm really not sure. So it'll maybe interesting to see if that changes with Shout Factory. If you're interested in learning a bit more, definitely check out some different threads in Reddit and do some Google searching around to see some of the changes with Shout Factory if you're a fan of the Shout Factory, Scream Factory stuff. But we'll see going forward what that means in terms of their sales calendar. Apart from that, again, there are a lot of different boutiques and Blu-ray and 4K sellers out there that are going to do sales at different times. Like I said, a good amount of them are probably doing something for Black Friday, even if it's just more of a blanket discount than something very specific or special to Black Friday. I will, again, like I said, post that Reddit thread in the description to be able to check more of that out if you are interested, and maybe something that I'm interested in checking out at different times in the year, just to maybe see if there's something I can discover a little bit more of. I know I've been doing a few of these episodes on the podcast, so maybe that's how I'm able to check some of them out. And in checking some of them out, I guess I'm interested in doing that, obviously, because I do like to see what's new in the physical media space. But sales are kind of a great way to check those out, and that's because they're obviously offering something at a discounted price. And there is a whole real psychology behind the marketing of shopping and consumer behaviors, and specifically around sales, that I thought it might be kind of interesting to take a little bit of a look into for this episode. Again, just to maybe start to think a little bit about where some of these sales come from, why sales in general kind of go as they do, whether it's Black Friday or otherwise. And in doing a little bit of research for this episode, I did find a really interesting article / interview with a German psychologist named Christian Elger. The interview that I kind of looked at was from 2018, and it was for the publication DW, which stands for Deutsche Welles. And the article is titled "Why Shopping Makes You Happy." I'll maybe put a link in description about this web article online as well if you're interested to check it out. But Christian Elger really has done a lot of research around consumer behaviors in terms of like looking at the way that people's brains work, specifically around shopping, and specifically as well, to dive even deeper into, to do with sales and how it affects our perception, how our brain activity works when we see something on sale, and the sort of purchasing habits that go into that. And it wasn't an extensive interview, but I thought it did provide some really interesting insight into this topic in particular. So Elgin, in this article and interview, talked about how the human brain has structures set up into how it operates. He refers to it as the reward system, which I'm not sure if it's a technical term or not, or if it's just one that he sort of utilizes to illustrate the point he's trying to get across. And basically in our brain, we have, neurons that will trigger this reward system for a variety of different reasons. And when it comes to shopping activities specifically, he really dove into how these neurons trigger the reward system for sales specifically, because the phenomenon of sales is, and even the marketing around sales has kind of been long studied for the purposes of drawing consumers in, and because marketing psychology is a very interesting and at some points kind of uncomfortable topic when you really dive into it. Anybody that's watched the TV show Mad Men will know that it is kind of an interesting topic that tries to get at something in a consumer that will really hook them in maybe an interesting way, maybe in a slightly unethical way. I don't, there's a lot of ways to take it. But there's a lot in what goes into a sale, whether it's, the presentation of something like a sign or an advertising campaign, or, how a sale is portrayed to consumers that can sort of trigger the reward system and those neurons to fire in your brain. And Elgar really, it was able to use some technology to look into the different parts of brain activity while someone is, buying things in a sale, or maybe going through a sales rack in a store. And it actually found a lot of parallels between this reward system and how it was being triggered during sales and comparing it in a similar way to how this sequence of, firing and triggering the reward system would also happen with things like drugs, with things like even gambling in certain ways, and can also, is the same thing that leads potentially to addictions, which is, a little more of the darker kind of pathway for a lot of those things. With drugs, there's obviously a chemical aspect of it too, but it is, things like shopping addictions are very real, and that does happen to a good number of people for a variety of reasons. And being addicted to that kind of dopamine hit of finding a sale, or finding something on sale, or buying something on sale, can most definitely mimic and potentially lead into an addictive behavior. So it was kind of interesting that he compared those two things, because I do think, and I don't necessarily want to dive into shopping addiction or collecting addiction or anything like that with this topic, but it is interesting that they are so closely related. And it does make sense that you will have people that were really feel like they are compelled to go shopping for deals anytime there are deals, which does explain a lot specifically about Black Friday, which is what Christian Elgar's interview does really look at in one aspect, is the idea of Black Friday shopping, and how people and consumers will go into a store and just buy certain things because it's on sale, and they still get kind of that dopamine hit, I guess you would really call it, from the brain in doing that. He also talked a little bit about discounted items in a sale, and how it leads to a sequence within a person's brain that normally, if you're shopping, you would be looking at a product and evaluating that product, whether it's for quality, whether it's for practicality, whether it's for price, and you're just kind of constantly going through an evaluating process of saying, I'm looking at a pair of jeans, they feel like they're well made, I have holes in some other jeans I need to replace, and is the price that they're asking something that I'm willing to pay. During these sales, there is basically a part of that evaluation that does get skewed a little bit, because your brain will kind of go, and he uses a phrase there to say that basically your brain will say there's no need to compare the prices or overthink this too much, because if you know that you're shopping somewhere, let's say at a Black Friday sale, you kind of have that understanding that, oh, this is very likely going to be the biggest discount you're going to find, or there's going to be the best price you'll ever have for this. So the part of that evaluation process, at least in terms of pricing, kind of goes away, as does some of the other ones. So something like practicality, or maybe even evaluating quality of something, you may look at the price and say, well, I don't need to worry about the price, and I might just use it in the future, so I'm just going to get it. And I think Black Friday sales in particular really work with this principle of, removing the barrier of entry for something. You may not really have bought a kitchen gadget or a certain piece of clothing, or something that you kind of go like, well, I might use that in the future, I might be interested in that, so I should get it now because it's really, really cheap. Now, I think we're probably all a little guilty at different times of buying something when it's on sale with the intent to use it, as opposed to it being something that we know we would use already. It happens. It happens to everybody. I think we go in with the best of intentions a lot of those times. So it does, make sense that oftentimes people will go in and buy something they don't really need, or maybe didn't think they needed before it was on sale, but they bought it because it was on sale. I think even that phrase of, well, I bought it because it was on sale, is something that I know I've heard from different people at different times, and probably even guilty of myself at different times. So that part does most definitely make sense in this sort of discussion about the psychology of sales and shopping during them. Elgar does also touch a little bit on some of the potential differences between sales in person as well as online sales and shopping. The in-person shopping experience is kind of enhanced by like a more of a tactile sense. You're able to get your hands on something, and if are able to grab and look at something and feel it, if it's clothing or something that you can feel, or get any kind of texture or quality feel from it, you are potentially more likely to buy it. And if it's on sale and you can get your hands on it, there is just an exponential increase in the probability that you're going to buy something like that. So often stores will have those sorts of displays of showing, here's a door crasher. I think of something like Black Friday, and there's most definitely like, oh, we're going to have things on sale we're not even going to tell you about, and put them right up front, and so you can get your hands on them and really kind of make an impulsive decision to buy it. I personally, this is a physical media movie podcast. I also do collect physical media and a lot of other things. I do have a big record collection, and I know on Black Friday there is an organization called Record Store Day that does specific kind of specialty releases on both Black Friday and on just the regular Record Store Day that happens in April. But I know a lot of stores that I've gone into on Black Friday often will do this kind of door crasher type of deal thing where, they may prominently put maybe a couple of boxes or crates of records up front with a heavy discount, maybe over and above what they might be offering on anything else. And, they may take like 2 of 10 copies of something that's a little more popular and just heavily discount it. And if you are one of the first people in line for the store, one of the first to get there, then you have your first pick of these sorts of things. So the psychology and the tactic behind that in-person kind of shopping for Black Friday and beyond is going to be a little bit different than something like an online sale. And because you're in front of a computer, being able to click around, potentially quickly compare, something in a different browser tab, there is going to be a few different tactics that these sales will probably utilize, because you can't get your hands on something physically. But you may have things like maybe changing prices multiple times over a sale. You may have countdowns for like, this is on sale for the next 30 minutes only, and having a countdown on that item on the website. I know this is something that if you've ever bought anything from Amazon on Black Friday or Amazon Prime Days or things like that, they typically will have like lightning deals that have a bit of a countdown on them, or even also have a percentage sold on them, which is something else that online sales can definitely do to say, certain amount has already been sold, or maybe just having the stock available for something. Some websites actually do have that as something they just have as part of their storefront. I'm thinking specifically of Vinegar Syndrome. They have, what is available of everything on their website at all times, whether it's limited edition, standard edition, whatever it is. So sometimes that's built into website, just as storefront as it goes. And that can kind of lead to a bit of the FOMO reaction, the fear of missing out, of saying, oh, well, there's so few of them here, or oh, there's a countdown, this deal is only going to be around this long. So it does stoke a little bit of that in the impulse buy, but this is a little bit different than if you were in-store shopping versus online shopping. And in terms of physical media sales, while there definitely are in-person sales, and I mentioned a little bit about, Barnes & Noble and that sort of thing, and very likely a lot of local stores that sell movies on physical media probably have some sort of sale for Black Friday or, any other times like that. But typically speaking, a lot of physical media sales do tend to happen online. So you may see some of the online kind of sales tactics a little bit more in these cases. Now, I don't want to do too much of a deep dive of the psychology and things. It's not an area that I am super familiar with, and I did want to do a little bit of research to sort of talk a little bit about some of this to frame the rest of the conversations a little bit. And I think it gives a little bit of an idea as to sort of, okay, this is the psychology of selling and marketing for these sales, and then take it in more of a direction for physical media. So how, does this potentially impact the ways that we as collectors would approach these different sales that would go on from our favorite physical media labels and boutique labels and any other place really that's selling Blu-rays and 4Ks and DVDs that we're looking to pick up? And came up with a few different ways that I could sort of think of to really, approach these sales, and some of these that I've kind of done myself, but also, ones I've seen people kind of do and prioritize in being part of the physical media space, both in person and online for some time. When I was running down the kind of calendar and schedule of a lot of the different sales that some of the different companies do, it probably got a bit of the sense that this is certainly something that happens with regularity, and you can count on these happening. A lot of them have been going on this way for years and years and years. So the ability to do some long-term planning for when these sales are going on is a really big part of collecting these days. And I think this is a little bit unique to maybe some of the impulse buying that people do on something like Black Friday if they're walking into a local department store or a Walmart or something like that. I feel like a lot of times physical media collectors do have the opportunity to do a little bit of this long-term planning. And I know if you know that a sale's coming up that you're maybe looking forward to, and you're following along with a label that is releasing a certain amount of movies, and you may kind of be able to take some notes in more of the longer term. Say if in 4 months time that a sale is going to be happening from, let's say, Arrow Films, and over the course of those 4 months you sort of keep tabs on what's getting released to say, oh, I really like 2 of the movies that they've got released in the next month, and then there's one the month after that I really like, and then there's another one the month after. It does give you an ability to sort of track some of those things and also kind of think about them. It does take a little bit of the impulse buying urge away, because you can start to really think about it and say like, oh, I really do love this movie and I want to own it on physical media. And maybe you have some where you go, oh, that would be great to have. And, in a couple months' time, as you're getting closer to the sale, you may have reevaluated that position and say, you know what, I do like that movie, but maybe it's not going to be part of my collection at this point in time. So, that ability to do some longer term planning, or even just planning in terms of maybe saving some extra money to up your budget for something like that, I think is something that a lot of people seem to do. Whether it's somebody talking about the sale hauls they do online, or even myself, I know I've done that as well, where that extra bit of time to know that, yes, there is going to be a sale coming up, and yeah, I think I'd like to pick something up. So taking a little bit of a long-term planning approach to it, I do think that is an interesting way to kind of not only be able to pick up some stuff at the sale, but also evaluate if you want to have something in your collection, and how badly do you want it, or is there prioritizing to go with it? Is a lot of ways to look at it, but I like the idea of the long-term planning aspect of it. Another approach that you often see when it comes to these kind of regular physical media sales is the thought of prioritizing quote unquote big releases, whether that means box sets, whether that means limited editions, whether that means steel books, or it's something specific about a release that maybe is special. Those ones that maybe have a little bit of a larger price tag attached to them. For example, I will go with the Criterion sale that's happening now. If you're really interested in checking out a specific box set from the Criterion collection, a 50% off sale is an interesting time to be able to pick one of those up, because it does, at least seem like in our heads we're getting it, for even more off than you would if it were just a regular release. It's still the same percentage, obviously, but having a $40 4K be $20 versus a box set that's $120 being only $60, you are definitely saving a lot more money on one item for those. And I know a lot of people will prioritize the bigger releases during these larger sales. And I know I've done this a little bit myself at different times with some releases, to say, hey, this is a good time to pick up one of these bigger collector sets or box sets. I guess I don't really have a lot of collector edition things in my collection, but bigger box sets and things that I'd been wanting, and maybe was not a little more hesitant to pull the trigger maybe in a full price. But even just being able to say, if there are two $100 box sets that you really want at a 50% off sale, you can get both of them for the price of one of them at the regular MSRP listed price. So, there's also some appeal of being able to get more in your collection for the money that you do have, and stretching your budget even further. So this is definitely one you see a lot of, and I think these sales are a really wonderful time to be able to pick up some of these kind of bigger box set limited releases. If you are a physical media collector, you probably have heard or have used the term blind buy before, which is effectively a term for when you're buying a movie on disc that you have never seen before, and you are using that purchase to be able to watch the film for the first time. There are some people that really, really love to do blind buys, and they, this is a way that they can see a lot of films that may not be available in other ways, or they just, want to see it in as good a quality as they can the first time out. And there are some people that blind buys are not really their thing. If you're more carefully curating your own collection, you may not want to, risk spending money on a film that you're not sure if you're even going to like, or maybe you do it and watch it, and if you don't like it, you decide to sell it or trade it in somewhere. There's ways to do the blind buy experience that can take away some of that, but blind buys are not necessarily for everybody. But if they are something you're interested in, sales on physical media can be a great way to do it, because again, the barrier of entry is going to be lessened, at least with the cost. So, if you're kind of interested in checking something out and you're really not sure if you're going to like it, it might be easier to swallow, a 50% off sale of it than full price. I know I do quite enjoy the experience of blind buys. Honestly, I will say some of my like favorite movies of all time I have discovered on blind buys, and some of them I've gotten full price, some of them I've gotten at sales. And I do typically, when I'm participating in a sale, try to allow myself to have at least one blind buy if my budget allows for it in some of these. And I think recognizing that and kind of putting that into your own plan going into a physical media sale is pretty advantageous, because the downside potentially of blind buys is if you enjoy blind buys and you go into a sale and you just go onto a website and start clicking anything that looks interesting, and suddenly you've got 13 movies in your cart and not enough budget to buy all of them. So it can get out of hand really quickly because it's kind of fun, but it is important, if you do like that, I think, to have some parameters for yourself, to still allow yourself to do it, but kind of understand that this is something you might be interested in. And if it's going to be part of your plan and part of your budget this time around, it can be a lot of fun. So I think it's interesting to approach it in that way as well, to know that, like, yeah, I want to check something out that I haven't checked out before. Maybe it's a director box set that you really want to get into, or an era of films. I film noir. It is Noir-vember, after all. If you want to get into it, some of these sales are a really good time to do that. You can also take an approach of, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it going full ham, which is basically to, amass a big budget for yourself and just buy as much as you possibly can. This is a way that a lot of people do go into physical media sales. They use it as an opportunity to really beef up their collection, whether they're new to collecting or not new to collecting, but maybe they just want to kind of really fill some holes or gaps in what they want in their collection, or films they love that they haven't picked up, or blind buys, or whatever it is. So there are people that will use these sales as opportunities to kind of go buck wild a little bit. And I mean, if it fits into a budget that you've set for yourself, all the power to you if you are interested in doing that. This approach, again, if budget is something that you need to plan and be more concerned with, then I probably wouldn't suggest the going full ham approach. But again, this is something that people do really enjoy, and can be quite exciting to beef up a collection and just have a bunch of new movies to watch afterwards. It can be pretty exciting and exhilarating, and I think it can be a lot of fun, as long as you are sort of approaching it in a way that isn't going to put you in sort of any financial dire straits or get you in trouble with running out of space or anything like that. But yeah, it's not something I've typically done myself, but it is something that I can see being a lot of fun if it's a way you'd like to approach a sale like this. Now, I've alluded to this a few times as this episode's gone on, and obviously made a direct reference to it in the title of this episode of Stop Worrying and Love a Budget. And I do think that budget and understanding the disposable income and finances you have going into a sale is really quite important. And the psychology aspect of things that Christian Elger mentioned, about similar behaviors in sales being, mimicking addictions and addictive behaviors and other things like drugs and gambling. You don't want, what you spend during a sale to put yourself into a troubling financial situation. And, it's something that has happened to people for certain. And, I think it's really important as collectors to really, understand that if you are getting into collecting anything, really, whether it's, vinyl records or comic books or Pokemon, sports cards, anything like that, and physical media as well, it is important to be conscious of the budget that you are going to set for yourself and what you kind of can spend or want to spend. Now, those can be two different things, certainly. So, I think, beginning with the budgeting topic and the things that you should sort of think about in terms of your own personal budget before a sale is to really identify, how much money you have to spend, or again, as I mentioned, how much money you want to spend, which can be, a little bit of a tweak in thinking, but isn't necessarily the same thing. For example, if you, let's say, have a budget of $200 of disposable income that you have earmarked to spend at a physical media sale, you can take the approach of saying that I don't want to spend any more than $200. And then you figure out, and prioritize what you want to purchase. And as long as it doesn't go over that $200, if that is, what you've set for yourself, then that's the way to go about it and way to be successful with it. If you decide that, you want to get as much as you can for that $200, then that is going to, obviously dictate your own plan for that budget. But you're still keeping to what you have set out to do. So there's different ways to approach that once you've identified the money that you're looking to potentially spend. You can really approach it different ways. I think the important thing with that is, like I said, to identify the amount that you're willing to spend and, spending within your own means and parameters, which for everybody is going to be a little bit different. There will be people that will come into a sale and they're looking to get one thing, and that's great. That is the budget that you're looking to set for yourself. There are people that are going to come in with a huge budget and are looking to take, several shopping bags worth of Blu-rays and 4Ks home after that sale, and that's great too. It's really identifying the parameters and, spending within your means in that. And, whatever that looks like for you is whatever it's going to look like. And it will look different, from sale to sale as well. Everybody's financial situation is different at different times, whether you're saving for something else or you are changing jobs, anything like that. Financial situations change. And I think it's important to understand that is quite fluid from sale to sale and from time to time, year to year, month to month. Once you have identified your own personal budget, then you can start to ask yourself a few questions that will relate to how you're spending that budget. So, do you have any sort of definite titles that you want to pick up? So this may go into a bit of the long-term planning part that I talked about before. Is there something specifically that you've said, oh, they've released that movie, it's one of my favorites, I'm really looking forward to picking it up? That's probably a definite title that you would want to pick up if it's available and if you're interested at that point in time. And if you have a few of those identified, then that can help again with this process of keeping within your budget and asking yourself the question and not getting overwhelmed when you get into a sale and just, there's so much here. It can get out of hand really quickly. I'm thinking in this case specifically from personal experience, really went through this year, earlier this year when I was in Toronto for TIFF and was in line for the Criterion Mobile Closet experience. And in that case, you basically were only allowed to purchase up to 3 titles directly from the mobile closet. So I had lots of time in line, a few hours with making friends with the people that I was standing in line with, and having a bit of a plan to say, okay, what do I want to pick up with my 3 selections, because I did want to get the maximum amount of that I could from that experience. If I'd gone in without a plan, I mean, it would have been great, but I would have been overwhelmed very, very quickly, and the 5 minutes that I had in the mobile closet would have flown by, and I probably would have been much more panicked than I ended up being. So, if you have something definitely that you want to pick up, that's good to identify at this point. It would also be a good question to ask yourself, is there something that I want to explore? Is there something new that I want to be picking up? Is there something that maybe I have not seen in a long time? And, those evaluative things that maybe with some long term planning you could do, but maybe you're also one of those people like me that does enjoy the occasional blind buy. And this is the time where you can kind of, again, set a little bit of parameters for yourself to say, maybe I'm going to do a little bit of both. Maybe there's these, 3 titles that I really would like to pick up. And I do have a little bit more budget than that. So maybe I'm allowing myself, 1 or 2 or 3 complete blind buys and just allowing yourself to be, inspired to pick something up and give yourself over to the blind buy experience, I guess you could say. But, I think it's an important question to ask yourself, to say, hey, within my budget and within my parameters, is this something that I'm looking to do? And it may not be, but it may be something that if you enjoy it, you could kind of do. I know with the recent Criterion flash sale that happened in October, I picked up quite a few titles because I had some gift cards from being a Criterion channel member that I was utilizing, and I knew there was specific ones I wanted to pick up, but I did allow myself the ability to pick up one complete blind buy in that lot of 5 or 6 films that I got, and end up being The Watermelon Woman, which is one that when Criterion announced it, I'd never heard of it before, read up a bit about it, sounded incredibly interesting, and I hadn't had the chance to see it before purchasing it. I missed it when it was on the Criterion channel streaming for a few months. So I knew that going in, and when I saw the title on the flash sale, thought, yes, right, this is one I've been looking forward to blind buying. And so I again allowed myself the parameters to pick it up and had some gift cards, or wasn't discount, I guess it was gift cards from being a channel member. So it was great, and I'm really looking forward to checking that out actually when I get to it, hopefully quite soon. Another aspect of budgeting to think about that I was sort of thinking a little bit about myself is not just the financial budgeting, but also the budgeting for your own space and time in terms of buying new movies. If you don't have the space in your setup, in your home, in your storage shelf for new movies, is that something you want to, continue to add to your collection? And if you do, does that mean you're taking certain things out of the space you already have? Space is finite for a lot of people. Not everyone has an infinite amount of shelf space, no matter how big or small your collection is. And it is something that you want to be conscious of. You never want to feel like a hobby is overrunning the space that you have or taking up too much space. I say this as someone that has movie shelves, and I've been actually upgrading my movie shelves to have a little bit more space, but I do also have shelves of records, shelves of video games, shelves of books, as does my wife. She has her own collections of things as well. And the space you have is limited, and being aware of that going into a sale is something I think it's important to be conscious of, because you don't just want to keep buying and buying movies without having a place for them. In terms of having enough time for buying new movies, this is something where you only are able to watch a certain amount of movies in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. And, buying everything you can possibly find doesn't mean you're going to necessarily have the time to watch everything. People will have jobs, have different time commitments, have different hobbies, have a family. There's all sorts of different demands on everyone's time. And this is something personally that I wanted to put on here and talk about, because this is the part of this that I think I'm trying to be most conscious of myself, because I have purchased a lot of new movies in the last probably year, and there's a lot of them that I really want to watch. I really want to watch, get on the shelf and evaluate if I want to keep them in the collection. And I do have a lot in my backlog. I think a lot of people probably have a backlog of movies they're waiting to watch or in the queue to see next. And adding to that can be more of a burden than what you have in terms of time. So I guess part of this is I'm saying this out loud to hold myself accountable to that, to make sure that I do watch the movies I have already purchased. So this is I'm going to try and really hold myself to this throughout anytime sales are going on, or just indeed in general, of making sure that I give myself the time to enjoy what I currently have, and then maybe look more seriously about going further with some of these other sales, or purchasing too much more in those cases. So this is part me, part a good piece of advice just going forward in general. The other thing I think that's important to remember when it comes to budgeting is in terms of the schedule and the timeline. The talked about how a lot of these sales are happening at very regular intervals, whether it's the same month every year or the same couple of months or the same time frame. Sales will happen again and again and again. They aren't going to simply go away. The Criterion Barnes & Noble sale is going to continue happening until it doesn't, but they'll probably make that abundantly clear if and when it does end. So, the FOMO and the fear of missing out on a sale price, you can take a little bit of solace with some of these and saying, if you don't buy it during this sale, it will be there at another sale. Now, I know in saying that, there's going to be lots of people saying, oh, but what if it goes out of print, or what if it goes away? And that is a real thing to consider. There are a lot of movies that will change hands in terms of the rights holders and who can release what. Maybe there's a remaster or an upgrade to 4K. There's a lot of those that can go into it, but it is important, again, to remember that the sales will continue to happen again and again. And there may be some movies that do go away, and that's something that everybody kind of has to be okay with. I know a lot of people will go through and say, oh, I kick myself for not buying such and such a movie when I saw it on the shelf for half price, and now it's gone out of print and is rare and goes for way more money on eBay or whatever. That's a perfectly normal reaction to have, but it is also part of the hobby that we're all in. It is going to happen to all of us with different movies at different times. But thinking of, oh, well, I'm going to miss out if I don't buy it at this sale. The sales themselves will happen again and again. And I think you can take some solace in that, to say, if I maybe don't have any disposable income to take part in a sale I would otherwise like to, that sale will happen again. And I think it's important to remember that as you go through and participate, or maybe sit out some of the sales that will go on. You will have that opportunity again at a different time. I think that's where I want to leave off the topic of sales for today. I do think, it is, like I said, sale season. It's kind of the time when a lot of people are looking towards these Black Friday sales and other types of sales, and getting into the gift giving season as well. I think it is something that's probably on a lot of people's minds and a lot of collectors' minds. And I'd be really interested to hear about how you all are approaching these physical media sales, and if you're new to collecting, or if you've been collecting for years, how it's shaped you as a collector, or maybe how you're starting to think about getting into these things. So I would really love to hear from any or all of you about that topic. I do put all of these episodes on YouTube, which you can comment on directly. I do also have an Instagram account, which is at Cinema on a Shelf, that you more than welcome to follow, and also, add comments to the episodes that I'll post in as their own posts. And also feel free to reach out, direct message me. I love interacting with so many of you. I've mentioned Dakota from Conscious Zoom podcast. That's how we got in touch, was through some direct messages on Reddit and then Instagram. So it's nice to meet new people like that, and it's been really great to hear from some of you that are out there listening. I do also have my own personal Letterboxd account, which if you're interested to follow what I am watching at any point in time, my username is at Maddie236. And I think in my next episode, I would like to do another, a label showcase, which the first one I did was of the Criterion Collection in one of my early episodes. And I think I would like to do one on a label that I have been collecting for some time now, and one that's a little bit in the movie news at this point. It's a legendary Hollywood studio that is currently at this point, taking bids for being up for sale. And they have a very specific physical media line, and for a long time have been big supporters of physical media. So I think in my next episode, we're going to do a little bit of a, label introduction about Warner Brothers, and specifically Warner Archive. So until next time, thank you all for listening. Take care.